It is very strange not to be going to CES, but to some extent, CES is coming to us. I don't know what this means, but we got the golden sample too. It is surprisingly light for this size. Sounds like aluminum. Finally something a little bit fresh from Cooler Master, maybe? All right, so this is pretty exciting. Being able to work with an enclosure and preview something in my own studio, get my own hardware in there, and get a feel for what the next evolution of enclosures is coming from Cooler Master. This is the MasterFrame 600, and it is almost made entirely of aluminum. So the exterior shell and the exoskeleton is made of aluminum, but with some steel accents here and there. And by accents, I mean like the motherboard tray, the cable cover, for example, and the storage cover as well, the power supply shroud and the hard drive cage. All that is steel, but everything around it is aluminum, which is kind of interesting. It's very light in structure and design. Like for a case this large, being able to lift it so easily is quite nice, especially once you populate everything in there. But the main three selling points of the MasterFrame 600 is the exoskeleton design. So the actual aluminum exterior shell that can be modular, and it is modular, although with my hands-on experience, I think it is far from finished. Number two is the dynamic frame that complements point number one with the exoskeleton frame, is that you have modularity and being able to shrink the enclosure into like an ITX or micro TX direction, or expand it to meet the extreme food tower needs at the same time. And point number three, and this is not new, we've seen Cooler Master try that again and again, is the whole maker-driven approach, being able to offer different front panels, different configuration options, different like modules for the enclosure to make it really your own. But it's never really taken off because complications with retailers and it becoming way more expensive. Once you choose your modules, in the end, it's better to just buy a case that you want instead of being able to Lego block your way into a very high price category. And so I'm kind of worried the same thing might happen here, but I hope that the accessories and all the modularity options that are possibly going to be available with the MasterFrame concept is going to be maybe widely available and is going to be more popular than was like 5-7 years ago. Now, from a design point of view, this case definitely looks better in renders just because the aluminum I have here is unfinished. It's the black aluminum, which looks like any other black enclosure, but in renders, where the aluminum is that silver and slightly more gray accent that is sandblasted or shiny, it is absolutely gorgeous. And I feel like that is going to be a really standout feature, and especially because the corners on the renders are completely unified versus in reality, you can definitely see the seams. But they sure make access easy all around, so everything is just magnetic, toolless, not a single thumb screw in sight. But we do see so many of these perforation holes along the perimeter of the exoskeleton. So on this side, on the back, on the top and the front, lots of holes, and the only thing that is currently mounted to them are these magnets that hold the side panels. Now, I love the idea of modular fan brackets and this whole rail system, so you can move one of them slightly further away to give you space for 120 or 140 support, and this goes for the top and the front. Unfortunately, the current mount here is pretty ridiculous, so like 2 screws at the back, and you cannot even access the screws that hold the rails because they're right below the front I/O. And there are screws over here underneath, but they're really hard to get to, so hopefully this changes. As you can see, the 2 rails at the front are way more accessible versus the top. I'm sure that will change in later. Also, the screws on all the rails came in loose. I'm not gonna ding them for that just because it's a way early preview sample, but you can see it holds 3 140mm fans, and the thing that I'm surprised about is that it will not support anything wider, even though we have this open space, and this is exactly why the rail system is so beautiful, giving us the opportunity to potentially install like 160, 180 fans, but apparently not with this frame. I mean, as of right now. I think the concept behind these perforations is to let you configure your guts the way you like. For example, moving the motherboard tray slightly down or up, depending if you want more clearance at the top or the bottom. But right now, the main sort of these little frame areas that are connected to the exoskeleton are riveted, so you cannot actually play around with those. Now looking in the back, you can see we have 3 sections here, which makes sense. Like, that's why we have the modular element right now that are riveted, but I'm sure in the end it will be screws that you can play around with and move the motherboard up and down. Although I'm surprised the PCI area is not more modular, just to eliminate some PCIe slots so you can move the motherboard area slightly down for either micro ATX or just standard ATX with more room at the top. I'm not sure if this is going to be permanent, but the other use of the perforations along the perimeter of the exoskeleton is to give you these little spacers onto which the side panel gets installed. What? And as for the inside, this looks like a standard mid-tower, but giving you some flexibility. So for example, this is removable, the cable cover, the storage bracket, the power supply shroud, the hard drive cage, all that can come out. And I'm guessing that is to give you the opportunity to potentially play around with the height adjustability behind the motherboard tray. But right now, you cannot adjust anything on the back, so I don't think the motherboard tray is going to have any height flexibility. And you cannot also rotate the motherboard for that vertical GPU, for that vertical column of air, just because there is nowhere to position the motherboard I/O. And so it doesn't have as much flexibility and modularity as they advertise. I was really excited to see how easy it would be to remove this corner knuckle to potentially reduce the size of an enclosure and see how these rails are attached and how they feel, but they're also riveted. Now I find this one weird. All this talk about modularity and creating the case how you want it, but you can't fit a 140 at the back. 120 only, even though you have enough width for 140mm fan support, although you can't because of how thick this pillar is. Of course, we have full side ventilation over here with a placeholder filter. I hope they don't use these garbage filters. But behind it, check it out. So right now, not much is happening. I can remove the storage bracket. In doing so, we reveal these 2 spines over here that are perfectly spaced out for 120mm fans, and I'm sure you can move one of them to accommodate larger fans like 140, but I just find it weird that they have this cross section with at least 3 other spines for the main frame, because that way, that would interfere with how you're supposed to mount the fans and how easy it would be to mount them in the first place. So one of my biggest concerns with the MasterFrame 600 is how user-friendly are all the modules and how to remove them. So let's see if I can take out the motherboard tray from these main spines. All right, we're 6 screws in. What else is, okay, so there's a screw right there that I cannot access, okay, and there's another one right there that I cannot access either. Seems like it's also screwed in from that side that I cannot access. So I'm guessing in the end, you would have to be able to remove this spine somehow in order to remove the motherboard tray, which seems like a lot of work. And let me know if you disagree, but I feel like this whole rail system and the perforated exoskeleton perimeters looks way too messy, especially when it comes to cable management. When there's nothing dedicated for cable management in this space, then you're in trouble. Like right now, for example, you'll be able to pass some cables through here, I guess, but then below the motherboard, there's no cover. So you'll be able to see those cables getting into where they need to go. And because of these 2 rails that are supposed to potentially hold the fans, if you are mounting fans in there, then everything is going to be kind of exposed on the inside. So I think from a concept point of view, we definitely need more cases like it, but the execution here with the MasterFrame 600 has me concerned in many ways. Not because of the rivets, but because of the potential nightmare that is going to be the user experience of trying to remove the corner to potentially shorten the frame, or trying to move these spines in areas that might give you better motherboard tray support, might give you better height flexibility for radiators instead of fans at the top and stuff. So I know this is a really early pre-production, pre-whatever sample just to get us an experience and give us an idea of the concept. But the MasterFrame 600, from your eyes, your point of view, what you've seen here today, does this make you excited for the future of Cooler Master? Just because there's so much marketing fluff around this case with dynamic frame, the exoskeleton versatile design, the maker-driven panels, and etc. But we've seen that in the past. The whole maker-driven approach did not fare well, and I'm concerned about that point of view. But I'm just genuinely more concerned about the frame level and the customizability aspect of it, and how it might be a little bit more difficult to do. And I think the user experience has to come first when it comes to being able to move the motherboard tray, for example, like I can't even access the screws. That's a problem. And I feel like that's going to be a problem later on just because, you know, the spines and the main pillars are already by design finished. And so how do you get around to getting those access, like removing screws from the back here? How do you get a screwdriver back there? Like if you have anything mounted at the top, no way, Jose. But having said all that, I am still excited about the future of the MasterFrame series and the aluminum, especially when it's finished and not just black. Please don't release black aluminum, it is pointless. But I'm Dmitry, thanks so much for watching. Thanks to Cooler Master for sending us out for this early preview sample. And I'll talk to you in the next video.